All right, so here is our last topic for Unit 1, which is operations on rational expressions. So hopefully you got all your factoring homework done, including the worksheets. I got those submitted. And now we just have this last little unit before we are ready to take our first unit exam. So operations on rational expressions. All we're going to do really from this section is simplifying rational expressions. And basically what we're looking to do is just reduce it. It's kind of like a big ugly fraction, right? And we want to be able to reduce this big ugly fraction. And in order to do that, what we need to first do is we can't just cancel, like look at this first example. We can't just cancel the x squared, right? Because right now this x squared is stuck like glue to these other terms with the plus and minus signs, okay? So you can only reduce common factors if they're being multiplied together like with parentheses and things, then we can do it. So what that tells us is that in order to simplify these, we must first factor them completely on top and bottom, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and write up here, we are going to factor the top and bottom completely. And then cancel common factors. I'll move my hand in just a second. Factor the top and bottom completely. Okay, so it's all factored in the numerator, all factored in the denominator. And then if we have common factors on top and bottom, then we can just cancel or reduce those common factors away. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at a couple examples. Okay, so on this first one, I see that I have three terms on top and bottom. So both of them, I'm going to use the sum product chart as my factoring method. So I'm going to go ahead and look over here, and my sum for the top polynomial is going to be -2 because that's my middle coefficient. And my product is going to be my first times my last coefficient. So my first coefficient here is a 1 times my last coefficient, which is -24. So 1 times -24 is -24. So I need something that multiplies to -24 that combines to -2, which would be -6 and +4. Okay. Now remember when we were factoring, what we ended up doing is once we have these two values, our two new numbers, then we replace our middle term, that -2x, right? We put an x on each of these numbers, and that way we have 4 terms and we can group. Okay. But remember at the end of the last video, I showed you a shortcut. So the shortcut was if my leading coefficient is a 1, okay, my leading coefficient is a 1, then that means I can use the shortcut. So if you don't remember the shortcut from the last video, you're welcome to go ahead and take these numbers and replace that middle term and do grouping, but I'm going to restate it because it's going to save us a lot of time. So basically what the shortcut says is that if our leading coefficient is a 1, then once we find these two numbers in our charts, those will just become the numbers in our factored quantities, which means that this top piece is going to factor into x - 6 times x plus 4. Okay, so whatever the numbers are in my chart here, those are the numbers that end up in my factored quantity. So yay, saves us a lot of work, right? Now this is only for when our leading coefficient is a 1. Okay, you can't use a shortcut if you had like a 2 in front of this x squared or a 3 in front of it or a negative. Okay. All right, so we've got the top fully factored. Now we want to fully factor the bottom. So again, I'm going to do sum product because I have 3 terms, right? No greatest common factor. My middle coefficient is a 6, so that's my sum. And my product is going to be my first coefficient times my last coefficient. So 1 times 8 is 8. So I need two numbers that multiply to 8 that will combine to give me 6, which would be 4 and 2, right? Both positive. So we have a +4 and a +2. So again, normally I would take these two numbers and replace that 6x with 4x and 2x, right? And then do grouping. But because, again, my leading coefficient is a 1 on this one as well, that means I can also do the shortcut here. Shortcut. Okay, so the shortcut tells me that whatever the numbers are in my chart, those are going to be the numbers in my factored quantity. Okay, so that means that on bottom, our denominator here is going to factor into x plus 4 times x plus 2. Okay. All right, so now we have this expression completely rewritten with everything factored. And now that everything is factored, you can see that we have a common factor of x plus 4 on top and bottom. So I'm just going to reduce that, mark that out, and what we're going to be left with is our x minus 6 on top and our x plus 2 on bottom. Okay, you don't have to leave the parentheses if there's just like one quantity, there's nothing else there. But remember, we cannot reduce any further. You can't reduce these x's, you can't reduce the 6 and the 2 because they're stuck like glue together with those terms, with those plus and minus signs. So this is as far as we can go on this one. Okay? All right, let's look at another one. Same idea. We want to factor the top completely, factor the bottom completely, and then reduce common factors. So let's look at this top part. We're going to use the sum product chart because we have a trinomial. Our sum is our middle coefficient, which here is -4. Our product is our first coefficient times our last coefficient. So 1 times 3, which gives me a product of 3, right? Now, I need something that multiplies to give me 3 that combines to -4. And the only thing that multiplies to give me 3 is 1 and 3, right? So if I want to be able to combine them to get a -4, then I'm going to have to use a -1 and a -3, right? Because my two negatives will multiply to give me the +3 I need for my product, and the two negatives will combine to give me the -4 I need for my sum. Okay, so that means I'm going to use a -1 and a -3, and then I check to see if I can use a shortcut, which here I can, right? Because my leading coefficient is a 1, so that means that I can use my shortcut. Shortcut, yay, right? So on top, this is going to factor into x minus 1 times x minus 3. Okay, and now I just need to do the same thing on the bottom. So on the bottom, if you notice right away, my leading coefficient is a 1, so I'm going to be able to use the shortcut on that one also. So yay for that. So let's make our chart. Our sum is a -9, and our product is our first coefficient times our last. So 1 times 8, which is just 8. I need something that multiplies to give me 8 that I can combine to get 9, which would have to be 8 and 1, right? And if I want it to be a -9, they both need to be negative. So -1 times -8 does give me the +8 product that I need, and -1 minus 8 gives me the -9 sum that I need. So that works, and we know that we can use the shortcut. Yay! So that means this one's going to factor, these are going to be the numbers in my factored quantities. So x minus 1 and x minus 8. Okay. Now that I've got it fully factored, I can go ahead and cancel or reduce any common factors away. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of my x minus 1s, which will leave me with x minus 3 over x minus 8. And we're just going to leave it like that. Okay. All right, let me show you one more, and then y'all can try some. So this one's a little bit different for two reasons. One, I clearly cannot use the shortcut, right? My leading coefficient is a 4 here, and down here it's a 2. And I can't reduce those because they're stuck like glue to these other terms, right? So I'm going to use a different factoring strategy for the top because I only have 2 terms. And then for the bottom, I'm going to use some product, but I'm not going to be able to use a shortcut, okay? So let's look at the top. The top has 2 terms, and there's no GCF, right? No greatest common factor. They don't have x's in common. They don't have numbers in common. But when I have 2 terms, remember, I'm looking for a sum or difference of cubes or a difference of squares. So in this case, it's squares, right? So I'm hoping that this is a difference of squares. Okay. So if I look at 4x squared minus 25, right? I just need to know what is the thing that's being squared from this term and what is the base being squared from this term. So in order to end up with 4x squared, I would have to square 2x, right? And in order to get 25, I would have to square 5. So these are my 2 bases, right? And remember, with the difference of squares, that says a squared minus b squared will factor into a minus b times a plus b, right? Or you can switch the order of these two, it doesn't matter. So once I know what my 2 bases are, here it's 2x and 5, I just plug it into this formula. So I know that the top is going to factor into 2x minus 5 times 2x plus 5. Okay, so the top of this one is completely done. Now I need to look at the bottom. Okay, so looking at the bottom, I'm still going to use the sum product chart. My sum is my middle coefficient, which is a -1, and my product is my first coefficient times my last coefficient, right? Which would be 2 times -10, which gives me a -20. So I need something that I can multiply to get -20 that I can combine to get a -1. And that would be -5 and +4, right? So I need to use a -5 and a +4. And I'm going to put on here no shortcut. Okay, I cannot use the shortcut here because my leading coefficient was a 2, not a 1. I can only use a shortcut when it's a 1. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these numbers from my table and replace that middle term. Now the middle term had a label of x, so when I put these numbers in, they also need to have a middle label of x, right? So I have 2x squared. I'm going to put in my -5x, my +4x, and then I have my -10. So remember, all I'm doing is taking, let me see if I have a different color here. All I'm doing is taking this middle term and replacing it with the two numbers that I got from the chart, right? Okay, and now that I have 4 terms, I can do my grouping factoring method. So out of the first 2, I can take out an x, which leaves me with 2x minus 5. And out of the second pairing, I can take out a +2, which leaves me with 2x minus 5. Okay, so now that they both have 2x minus 5, I can take out that quantity, and I'll be left with an x from the first term and a +2 from the second term. So I want to put my leftovers in parentheses. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put that up here. So we have 2x minus 5 and x plus 2. So now that we've completely factored the top and we've completely factored the bottom, now we can go ahead and reduce common factors. And what we're left with is 2x plus 5 on the top and x plus 2 on the bottom. Okay, not too bad, hopefully. So if you did your factoring homework, this one should be much, much, much more easy, right? Because you had plenty of practice factoring these. So there are 3 on the next page for you guys to try. So go ahead and pause this video so that you can work them out. And then whenever you're ready to check yourself, or if you get stuck somewhere, go ahead and push play and we'll go through them. Okay? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and talk you through the practice problems. On number 1, you have x squared minus 2x minus 35 on top. There's 3 terms, so we do sum product. Your sum is -2. Product is -35, right? And we can use our shortcut because our leading coefficient's a 1. Yay! So something that multiplies to -35 that combines to -2 would be -7 and +5. So we can use our shortcut and just go straight into that factors into x minus 7, x plus 5. Same thing in the denominator over here. Okay, I have a leading coefficient of 1, so I can use a shortcut again, but this time I need something that sums to -3 and multiplies to -28, which would be -7 and 4. Because my leading coefficient is still a 1, I can use my shortcut. So whatever numbers I got in my chart, those are the numbers I'm going to use in my factored quantities. So x minus 7 and x plus 4. Then I have the common factor on top and bottom, so I can cancel that out, and my solution should be x plus 5 over x plus 4. Okay. All right, let's look at the second one. Second one, same idea. I have x squared plus 7x minus 18, which means my sum is 7, my product is -18. So I can get a -18 that combines to a +7 by using +9 and -2. And I can use my shortcut because notice over here my leading coefficient is a 1. So I can take these two numbers and just go ahead and conclude that it factors into x plus 9 and x minus 2. And then I want to do the same thing on the bottom here, right? This time my sum is 14 and my product is 45. So I need 2 numbers that multiply to 45 that combine to 14, which would be 9 and 5. And again, I can use the shortcut because my leading coefficient is a 1. So the bottom will factor into x plus 9 times x plus 5. And when I cancel my common factor on top and bottom, I'm left with just x minus 2 times x plus 5, right? All right, so now let's look at our last one, number 3 here. So number 3 was a little bit different, right? I cannot use the shortcut on the top one because I have a leading coefficient of 3. So I'm still going to use my chart to find the sum of 8 and the product of -9, which I got by doing the first times the last coefficient, right? So I know that to multiply to get -9 and add to a positive 8, I need a +9 and a -1. I can't use the shortcut, right? So I'm going to use that 9 and -1 from my chart and just use them to replace that middle term. So instead of writing 8x, I'm going to write in 9x minus 1x, and then I can group. So once you complete the grouping process, you should have the quantities x plus 3 and 3x minus 1. So that is going to be your factored numerator for this number 3 expression. Okay, and then when we look at the denominator here, notice this is one we can do the shortcut with. So yay, our sum is 1 because that's the coefficient of our middle term, and our product is -6. So to combine to 1 and multiply to -6, I'm going to use 3 and -2, and I can use the shortcut. So I can just go straight from here over to this factors into x plus 3 times x minus 2. I cancel my common factor, and I'm left with 3x minus 1 over x minus 2. Okay. All right, so that is the end of this section, which is operation on rational expressions. So you should now be able to complete the Knewton assignment called operations on rational expressions, as well as notice at the bottom of this page on your note, it says that we have a worksheet, right? So this worksheet is now also due, okay? And the worksheet is called Simplifying Rational Expressions. So you have 2 assignments due after this video. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm happy to help.